They said he was nothing. A nobody. A boy without a name, a family, or a future. But that night, inside the glowing skyscraper lobby of Blackwell Enterprises, the nobody was about to be seen by everyone. Noah was just 17. An orphan who had grown up with more scars than birthdays. He wore second-hand sneakers, their soles peeling at the edges, and carried a battered duffel bag that rattled with the sound of coins instead of bills. To the polished marble floors, glass chandeliers, and silk suits around him, he didn't belong. And people made sure he knew it. The receptionist curled her lip. Security guards exchanged smirks. Every pair of eyes told him the same story: you don't belong here. Then came the man himself, Richard Blackwell, the billionaire, the power broker. A man who walked into rooms and bent them to his will. He towered in his Italian suit, cufflinks glinting like twin daggers, his diamond watch screaming wealth with every flick of his wrist. He saw Noah standing there, unsure, fidgeting with the strap of his bag. Richard tilted his head, squinting as if the boy were some unpleasant stain on the carpet. Then, with a cold chuckle, he said the words that cut deeper than any knife. "Who let the janitors stray in here?" The lobby erupted with laughter. Laughter sharp as glass. Noah's fists clenched. His shoulders trembled. Every muscle begged him to lash out, to shout back, to fight. But he remembered the rules of survival that had kept him alive in the orphanage, in the alleys, in the world that always said no. Stay silent. Swallow your pride. Live to fight another day. So he lowered his head, said nothing, and endured the storm of ridicule. But what they didn't know, what Richard Blackwell would soon learn, is that inside that orphan's chest beat the heart of a warrior. Because Noah had been trained, not in glossy studios or expensive dojos, but in broken gyms with rusty equipment, under mentors who believed a boy with nothing had everything to fight for. Martial arts wasn't a sport for him. It was survival. And before I take you deeper into this story, pause for a moment. If you believe no one should be mocked because of where they come from, hit that subscribe button right now. On this channel, we lift up the underdogs, we expose the arrogant, and we tell the stories that remind the world, strength doesn't always wear a suit. Back in that lobby, Richard's voice boomed again. "Get him out of here," he barked at his guards. "This is no place for charity cases." The guards obeyed. Rough hands shoved Noah's shoulders, forcing him through the revolving doors and into the cold rain. Outside, the storm soaked his clothes, plastered his hair to his forehead, and blurred the city lights into rivers of neon. He walked alone, each step echoing with the billionaire's laughter. But he didn't cry. He didn't break. Instead, he whispered to himself, one day they'll see who I really am." And fate had already begun to move. Because less than 24 hours later, Richard Blackwell, the man untouchable in his wealth, adored by the powerful, feared by rivals, would fall to his knees, his life dangling by a thread. And the only person who could save him was the orphan boy he mocked. But how does a despised, penniless teenager end up in the position to save a billionaire's life? And why would he risk everything for the very man who humiliated him? The morning sun painted the city in gold, but for Noah, it didn't feel like a new day. The sting of humiliation still burned in his chest. He walked the streets with his duffel bag slung over his shoulder, replaying Richard Blackwell's words again and again: stray, janitor's kid, charity case. Noah muttered under his breath, "One day," but his voice drowned in the noise of honking taxis and chattering crowds. He didn't know where he was heading, just moving forward like he always had. Orphan boys didn't have destinations, only survival. But fate was about to turn an ordinary street into the stage for something extraordinary. Across town, Richard Blackwell strutted out of his gleaming high-rise office. His driver stood ready beside a glossy black limousine, door open, engine humming. The billionaire adjusted his silk tie and looked down at his diamond-studded watch. He was running late for a luncheon with investors. The sidewalk bustled with ordinary people, workers, street vendors, mothers with strollers. To Richard, they weren't people. They were background noise. And then, like a shadow splitting the day, a figure broke from the crowd. A man in a tattered jacket, eyes wild with desperation. In his hand glinted a knife. "Blackwell," the man shouted, his voice cracking with fury. "You ruined me. You took everything from me." Gasps rippled through the street. The man lunged. Richard froze, shock written across his face. The bodyguards were too far behind, distracted by the commotion at the curb. In that split second, the invincible billionaire looked very, very human. The knife came closer. Richard stumbled back, tripping on the curb, falling hard onto the pavement. The attacker raised the blade high. "Today you pay." And then, like lightning, another figure appeared. Noah, the orphan boy. His duffel bag hit the ground as his body moved on instinct. He had spotted the glint of steel, read the attacker's stance, and in one fluid motion he surged forward. The crowd cried out. Noah's hand snapped onto the attacker's wrist before the blade could fall. With a sharp twist, he redirected the strike away from Richard's chest. The attacker roared in pain, slashing wildly, but Noah's movements were controlled, disciplined, fierce. A quick strike to the ribs. A sweep of the leg. The man stumbled. But he wasn't finished. The attacker swung again, wild and sloppy. Noah ducked, his eyes narrowing. Then came the move he'd practiced 1,000 times in the dim corners of that broken-down gym. A precise elbow strike to the jaw. The man crumpled, knife clattering to the pavement. The street froze in stunned silence. There stood Noah, chest heaving, fists clenched, the boy once mocked as nothing, now standing over the man who tried to end Richard Blackwell's life. For the first time Richard saw him. Really saw him. Not as a stray, not as a janitor's kid, but as a shield that had saved him from death. Richard's lips trembled. His diamond watch caught the sunlight, but in that moment, all the wealth in the world couldn't buy back his dignity. He owed it to the boy he had despised. Noah bent down, picking up the knife. He tossed it far from reach. His gaze met Richard's. There were no words, only silence. Silence that screamed louder than Richard's insults the day before. The bodyguards finally arrived, too late, huffing as they yanked the fallen attacker off the ground. "Sir, are you hurt?" one of them asked. Richard didn't answer. His eyes remained locked on Noah. Noah didn't wait for gratitude. Didn't wait for applause. He picked up his duffel bag, slung it over his shoulder, and began walking away. The crowd parted for him. The same crowd that had stared at him yesterday with disgust now looked at him with awe. But as Noah disappeared into the busy street, Richard's voice finally broke through. "Wait." Noah paused but didn't turn. Richard struggled to his feet, adjusting his ruined suit, his pride bleeding onto the sidewalk. His voice carried an edge of desperation. Who are you?" Noah turned slightly, just enough for Richard to see the sharpness in his eyes, the fire in his soul. "I'm the boy you called a stray," he said quietly. And then he walked away, swallowed by the city. The street buzzed with whispers. Some recorded on their phones, videos already spreading online. The world had seen it, the billionaire saved by a nameless orphan. But this wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. Because that knife-wielding man wasn't alone. He was a symptom of something bigger. And Noah, unknowingly, had just stepped into a war that went beyond one street, one attack, one insult. The next time their paths crossed, Richard wouldn't just need Noah's strength. He would need his courage. And the orphan boy would be forced to choose: save the man who despised him, or walk away and let arrogance collapse under its own weight. News travels fast in the city. But when a billionaire nearly dies in broad daylight and is saved by an orphan teen fighter, it travels faster than wildfire. By the evening, clips of the confrontation were plastered across social media. Millions watched the video of Noah twisting the knife from the attacker's grip and dropping him with precision. Headlines screamed, "Teen hero saves billionaire in shocking street attack." From nobody to Guardian, who is the boy who saved Richard Blackwell? And while the world buzzed with curiosity, Richard Blackwell sat in his penthouse, staring out at the city lights with a drink in his trembling hand. The man who once laughed at Noah now couldn't escape the image of him standing tall, fists raised, unshaken in the face of death. For the first time in decades, Richard felt something unfamiliar: gratitude and guilt. But gratitude doesn't erase pride. The next morning, Richard arrived at a press conference flanked by cameras and reporters. His PR team had begged him to use the moment to spin the story, to control the narrative. He cleared his throat before the flashing bulbs. I want to thank the young man who intervened yesterday. His courage is commendable." But when the crowd shouted questions, "Who is he? What's his name? Will you reward him?" Richard hesitated. His lips pressed into a thin line. Reward him? Admit the billionaire's life was spared by a boy he had publicly mocked? Instead, Richard brushed the questions aside. Security has been tightened. There will be no further comment. And with that, he walked away, leaving the reporters buzzing and the public divided. Meanwhile, Noah was back in the world that had always forgotten him. A cramped shelter room with peeling paint and squeaky bunks. His phone, an old, cracked screen model, buzzed with notifications he barely understood. Messages from strangers. "You're a hero. Are you really a fighter? You saved his life, man. Teach us, sensei." Noah scrolled through, confused. Fame? Recognition? These things weren't meant for him. But the city wasn't about to let him stay invisible. 2 days later, he was walking down a crowded street when a black SUV screeched to a stop beside him. The window rolled down and there sat Richard Blackwell, his sharp eyes narrowed behind tinted glasses. "Get in," Richard ordered. Noah shook his head. "Not interested." Richard sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. "Listen, boy." Noah's eyes snapped. "Name's Noah, not boy." For a moment, silence hung in the air. Richard exhaled. "Fine, Noah. I need to speak with you. Somewhere private." Inside the car, the tension was thick. Richard fidgeted with his cufflinks, something he rarely did. "I'll be blunt," Richard began. "The man who attacked me, he wasn't just some lunatic. He was a former employee. A man I ruined in business." Noah leaned back, unimpressed. "Doesn't surprise me." Richard bristled but pressed on. "If there's one, there may be more. I have enemies. People who would love to see me gone. And after what you did," he paused. "You might be the only one I can trust." Noah chuckled bitterly. "Trust? You called me a stray. You had me thrown out like trash. And now you want me to watch your back." Richard's jaw tightened. He wasn't used to being spoken to like this. But something in Noah's tone and his fire forced him to listen. "You don't have to like me," Richard said finally. "But you saved my life once. I may need you to do it again." That night, Noah couldn't sleep. He thought of Richard's words. He thought of the attacker's rage, of the knife flashing in daylight. He thought of the orphanage, of the other kids who never made it out, who never had a chance. Maybe this wasn't about Richard. Maybe it was bigger. The city was broken. Power had crushed the powerless for too long. Maybe saving Richard wasn't about the man, it was about proving that even the lowest, the forgotten, could stand tall and change the story. But just as Noah began to consider stepping into Richard's world again, a shadow crossed his path. He was leaving the shelter when he noticed it, a figure leaning against the alley wall, watching him. The man's voice was cold, sharp as a blade. "You should have minded your business, kid. The boss doesn't like loose ends." Behind him, 2 more men stepped out of the darkness. Their fists clenched, their eyes burning with intent. Noah dropped his duffel bag, his body sliding into a stance. His heart pounded, but his spirit didn't waver. This wasn't a random threat. This was connected. Whoever wanted Richard gone now wanted him gone too. And the fight was just beginning. Could an orphan teen really survive a war with powerful enemies, protect the man who once despised him, and prove that true strength comes from the soul, not the suit? The final showdown would answer it all. The alley was silent except for the sound of shuffling feet. 3 men surrounded Noah, their eyes cold, their fists clenched. "You should have walked away," the leader sneered, twirling a metal pipe in his hand. "You saved the wrong man." Noah's breath steadied. His stance widened, knees bent, arms raised. He had no weapons, only years of discipline, training burned into his bones from nights in a crumbling gym. The first thug lunged. Noah sidestepped, driving a sharp kick to his ribs. The man collapsed against the wall with a grunt. The second swung at Noah's head. Noah ducked, caught his arm, and flipped him over his shoulder. The man hit the pavement hard, groaning. But the leader with the pipe was faster, meaner. He swung with deadly force. Noah blocked, pain rattling his forearm, but he didn't flinch. He struck back with a clean punch to the jaw, snapping the man's head sideways. The crowd that had gathered at the mouth of the alley gasped. They weren't just watching a fight. They were watching an orphan boy stand against the kind of men even grown fighters feared. When the leader staggered back, blood dripping from his lip, he spat on the ground. "This ain't over, kid. You're marked now. Both you and Blackwell." The men retreated, melting into the shadows. Noah stood in the center of the alley, chest heaving, bruised but unbroken. He didn't realize the cameras were out. Strangers had recorded the whole thing. By nightfall, yet another video of him would flood the internet. This time not just saving Richard, but defending himself against hired thugs. Hours later, Richard Blackwell sat in his boardroom, staring at a tablet playing the footage. His board members whispered around the table, debating security risks, insurance policies, public relations strategies. But Richard wasn't listening. He was watching Noah fight, seeing the fire in his eyes, the resolve in his movements. The same boy he had mocked as a stray was now the reason he was alive. Twice. And for the first time in his life, Richard felt shame cut deeper than any enemy's knife. The next morning, Richard did something he had never done before. He called a press conference. This time, not to spin the story, not to protect his brand, but to tell the truth. When the cameras flashed, Richard stepped up to the podium. His voice trembled at first but then grew stronger. 2 days ago I called a boy worthless. I mocked his past, his struggle, his very existence. I was wrong. That same boy has saved my life, not once but twice. His name is Noah. And he is more of a man than I have ever been. Gasps filled the room. Reporters scribbled furiously. Richard's voice cracked. Noah is not a stray. He is a warrior. He is proof that greatness doesn't come from wealth or power. It comes from courage, discipline, and the will to stand when the world tries to break you. And then, to everyone's shock, Richard did the unthinkable. He stepped aside from the microphone and gestured. From behind the curtain, Noah appeared, nervous, hands shoved into the pockets of his worn jacket. The crowd erupted. Cameras flashed. Richard looked at him, his eyes soft for the first time. Noah, I owe you my life. And from today forward, I will honor that debt. Not with money, not with gifts, but with respect. Noah stood tall, his voice quiet but steady. I didn't do it for respect. I did it because it was right. The room fell silent. Reporters leaned in, hungry for every word. Noah continued, strength isn't about hurting others. It's about protecting those who can't protect themselves, even if they don't see your worth. In that moment, Noah wasn't just speaking to Richard. He was speaking to everyone who had ever been overlooked, underestimated, or despised. The video of that press conference spread farther than any business deal Richard had ever made. It reached kids in shelters, workers in factories, fighters training in rundown gyms. And for the first time, Noah wasn't invisible. He was a symbol. Richard, humbled, began funding programs for orphan children, not out of pity but in honor of Noah. The world saw him change, not just as a businessman but as a man. But for Noah, the victory wasn't in headlines or praise. It was in proving to himself, and to the world, that your past does not define your future. He walked the streets now not as a shadow but as a reminder. Courage can rise from the lowest places. True power isn't in titles, money, or fame. It's in choosing to rise when the world calls you nothing. It's in standing up even when standing alone. What about you? Do you believe that one act of courage can rewrite an entire story, no matter how hopeless it seems? If Noah's journey moved you, if you believe in the strength of underdogs and the power of redemption, then join us. Hit that subscribe button right now so you never miss another story that proves even the forgotten can rise and change the world.